So, when I say the word Crusades, what pops into your head? Probably knights in shining armor, right? On some grand divine mission? Well, that familiar story of a holy war, that's really just the opening act. The full story is so much more complex and, honestly, way more fascinating, and it shaped the world in ways you might not expect. So let's peel back some of those layers.
And that brings us to the central question we're going to tackle. Were the Crusaders devout pilgrims just fighting to get their Holy Land back, or were they ambitious invaders driven more by the promise of wealth and power? The truth, as we're about to see, is this incredibly messy, complex tapestry. It's woven from faith, sure, but also greed, politics, and straight-up desperation. Untangling that is what makes this whole period of history so compelling.
I mean, the version we all kind of know is pretty straightforward, isn't it? European Christians, filled with religious zeal, launched these huge wars to take back Jerusalem from Muslim rule. It's a powerful story, all faith and fury. But it totally misses the crucial political drama that actually got the ball rolling.
Because here's the thing, the First Crusade didn't just start with some unprompted attack, it actually began with a desperate call for help. See, this wasn't just about religion, not at first. It was a direct response to a very real political emergency that was unfolding in the East.
Okay, so just look at how fast everything went down. It all kicks off in 1071. The Byzantine Empire, you can think of them as the Eastern Roman Empire, gets absolutely crushed at the Battle of Manzikert. The winners, the Seljuk Turks, this rising power that had taken over most of the Middle East. Now, jump forward about 20 years. The Byzantine Emperor, a guy named Alexius I, is in serious trouble. He sends a message to the West, but he's not asking for a holy war. He's asking for skilled mercenaries to help him fight off the Turks. But when that message lands on the desk of Pope Urban II, he sees something much, much bigger. He sees a golden opportunity.
So, how on earth does a simple request for some hired swords turn into this massive, multi-generational movement that pulls in hundreds of thousands of people? Well, it happened because that desperate plea for help landed right in the middle of a perfect storm of religious fervor, political ambition, and economic hunger.
You can really break it down into three key ingredients that cooked up this storm. First, you've got the Pope. The Papacy was more powerful than ever, and it was looking for a way to really stamp its authority across all of Christendom. Second, political ambition. You had all these kings and nobles who were eager to grab more land and power, and frankly, they needed something for their violent knights to do besides fighting each other at home. And third, plain old economic opportunity. The lure of land, riches, and brand new trade routes was very, very tempting.
But look, to get regular people and all those knights on board, you need something more than just politics and money. You need a powerful spiritual motivation. And Pope Urban offered the ultimate incentive, indulgencia. This was the promise that if you went to fight, and maybe even died in this holy cause, every single one of your sins would be wiped clean. In that deeply religious world, well, that was an offer that was almost impossible to refuse.
And this just lays it all out perfectly. It was a tale of two promises. On one side, you have the promise of heaven, forgiveness for your sins, spiritual glory, the salvation of your soul, liberating holy sites. But on the other side, you have the very real, very tangible promises of earth. Land for younger sons who had no inheritance to look forward to, the chance for wealth and plunder, new trade routes for merchants, and, of course, massive political power and prestige for the leaders. It was this mix, the sacred and the profane, that made the Crusades so incredibly powerful.
So, with all of these competing forces pushing and pulling, what actually happened on the ground? Well, the consequences of the Crusades were just as complicated and contradictory as their origins. They ended up creating huge, lasting changes for both the East and the West.
You know, the craziest thing is that the First Crusade, against all logic and all odds, was a stunning military success. It was brutal for sure, but they did it. In 1099, after a really bloody siege, the Crusaders captured Jerusalem. And they didn't stop there. They went on to set up 4 Crusader states right in the heart of the Levant. It was a Western European foothold that, amazingly, would last for almost 2 centuries.
But, and this is a huge but, they weren't all success stories, not even close. The Fourth Crusade is maybe the best example of how things could go spectacularly wrong. Instead of going to the Holy Land to fight Muslims, the Crusaders got sidetracked by politics and greed, and they ended up attacking and just brutally sacking the Christian city of Constantinople in 1204. It was an absolute betrayal that shattered the Christian world.
And this brings us right to the core of it all. The legacy of the Crusades is a true double-edged sword. On one side, you had this incredible cultural exchange.
Advanced knowledge about medicine, math, and philosophy from the Islamic world started pouring into Europe. You also got military innovations, like the famous Knights Templar, and even huge economic growth that fueled the rise of trading powerhouses like Venice and Genoa. But the other edge of that sword, it was sharp and it was ugly. The crusading movement unleashed horrific waves of persecution, not just against people in the Holy Land, but against Jewish communities back home in Europe. So that brings us to the final and maybe the most important question. Why are we still talking about this 900 years later? It's because the legacy of the Crusades is still being fought over, debated, and reshaped right now, today.
One of the most significant, and maybe unexpected, long-term results of the Crusades was that it helped forge a kind of collective Western identity. I mean, think about it. For the very first time, you had people from France, Germany, Italy, all these different places fighting together under one banner, the cross, against what they saw as a common enemy. That shared experience helped create this sense of a unified Christendom that hadn't really existed before.
And this quote just nails the reason why this whole topic is still so controversial. For some in the West, the Crusades get romanticized. They're seen as these heroic, noble adventures. But for many in the Middle East, the memory is very different. It's remembered as a time of violent foreign invasion and brutal conquest. In these two completely different perspectives, they are a direct legacy of the events themselves. So we're left with this, right? How does a conflict from 900 years ago still manage to define our world? The Crusades were about faith and fury, yes, but also about politics and profit, pilgrimage and plunder. It was a messy, complicated clash of worlds that left a legacy of both connection and deep conflict. And trying to understand it isn't just about understanding the past, it's about understanding the deep historical roots of the world we're all living in today.